opportunities, all the questions that you can possibly ask. And of course, our guest still here in studio with us, painting for us a picture of the entire process. Of course, his many learnings, having burnt his fingers along the way, and what he has been able to do now, post those challenges. Let's continue now.
Yeah.
Before we proceeded on that break, you had talked about the need to protect farmers from the flow of some of these goods across borders and the challenges that they create. But that becomes challenging, of course, with things like the East Africa community in place and the agreements we have with our neighbors. For me, I think the challenge you're alluding to is a bit different, and it's the cyclical nature of agricultural production. The continued cycle of shortages and gluts. How come we're not able to sort of create a situation where, despite some of these things being seasonal, we can have that supply consistent throughout the year, so that then the pricing can be something that we can sort of rationalize, especially when you think about the fact that for many of these products, they're everyday products, and we know that when it rains, there will be increase in supply, and when it stops raining, there's going to be a shortage. Yes.
Basically, that's why I mentioned before we went for a break, the need to now adopt technology. So it's an education thing, and
so
remember,
technology and innovation.
Exactly. Not really innovation. I talk about innovation. I don't like mentioning innovation in agriculture, because some of these things are there, plain and simple. Because there's nothing new to innovate about having charcoal cold rooms in farms.
Yes.
You know, there's nothing new about that. Innovation, yes, is fine. However, I think when you talk about innovation, I think it is just an NGO term to make extra money in agriculture.
Yes.
But these things are there. If you look at in California, they dig really huge parts of their farms and store potatoes for quite some time.
Yes,
these are things we already have.
Yes.
I farm in Maasai land, and they know how to preserve maize, you know, just under trees, you know. So it's basically making sure that this education thing, and also the technology. When I talk about technology, I think it is now beyond the normal things we do. And now we adopt things like solar, probably dryers, where you have harvest tomatoes and you put there. But when you also look at it critically, and probably I can ask you this question, is would you go and buy dry tomatoes?
Yes. In fact, I preserve my own tomatoes, but that's a story for another day. Yes.
How many people would do that?
Yes.
Because I don't think I've ever been sent to, and I've told, go and buy the dried tomatoes. So it is beyond the number of people that have to be fed in Kenya.
So essentially what you're saying, and sorry to interrupt you, for me then I would still call it innovation in the marketplace, because it involves getting people to change their mindsets. For example, there are people who will swear they will not eat frozen foods.
Yes.
They'll say, mi nataka nyama fresh. Ya fridge staki.
Yes.
Nataka samaki fresh, ile imetoka kwa maji sahi.
Yes.
The chap lives in Nairobi. There are no lakes here, so it has to be ferried cold, or one of those things. So how then do you start to change the mindsets of these people, so you can change the dynamic for contract farmers?
Exactly. So you see now that moves now from farmers to the end users. However, these people who are consuming this are not as many as compared to the rest. For example, I know this is an average sized onion.
Yes.
But this is what probably we've been told the market wants. But if you really go to the market, then 80% of the market, zile ndogo kabisa. So you see, it's also an education thing, and farmers getting to understand that they're doing it as a business. So instead of them going to buy seeds for 40,000 shillings, why don't they buy the ones for 10,000 shillings and grow the size that 80% of the market wants? The other thing is other things like storage facilities. Once you harvest, but remember when you're doing farming, you're growing crops this season, you want to harvest to get that money for the next season and do other things also with that money. So you don't have the luxury of holding on to your produce until the prices increase. Then we also have a very high percentage of farmers who are now taking up irrigation. So it means that whether it has rained or not, I will still be in the market. But also the dynamics of farming is crazy. You know, and so that when talk about technology and contract farming, then it means that the people who are giving out contracts then also play a certain role. And it moves from academia into practical. Yes.
So then with that in mind, then would it be possible for us then to say that Kenyans can pursue contract farming from a market direction?
Yes.
Such that if Noah has figured out how to hold a captive market that demands milk, for example, in Kenya. In Nairobi, many people cannot afford milk because of the way it's delivered to market. It increases its price exponentially. Yes. The same thing for beef and that sort of thing, and so many other things. And we've seen attempts at the local level to get this to arrive in market in different forms, in preserved forms, in cheaper forms, but there has been no broad-based, well-supported, well-documented ways to do this. Do you think there is space to start to do that? For example, if you could deliver a pre-cooked nyama for the Kibera market, yes. I mean, where it takes just 5 minutes to prepare a meal, unaongeza mboga and that sort of thing, I mean, you would have hit something quite big.
But you know, that comes now with the pricing dynamics.
Yes.
Because that anything that you add value is slightly higher. However, also remember that Nairobi Metropolitan, we need to feed close to 5 million people every day.
Yes.
So that is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It means that if it is an onion, at least 3 million of these people take that small onion every day. So it means the market is there. What we don't have is a way of bringing the market and reducing the gap between the farmer and the market. And the costs are heavy. I remember we were doing some research a few years back during the drought, and we were asking ourselves, why is the price of food so high? Why is it that farmers are throwing food and we have hunger in the country, you know? And we realized that, for example, sales charges. If I harvest tomatoes, onions from my farm in Namanga, and I bring them to Nairobi, I will need to pay close to 200 shillings for every net. So if I have 2,000 nets, I'm going to part with 40,000 shillings. Wow. See, that already changes the dynamics of the pricing. The local market, in terms of the people who eat fresh produce, are not ready for processed food. And that is why I want to go to a place where I'm seeing the skuma is being cut. I'm waiting for that fresh thing.
But aren't we then saying that is one of the major challenges that needs to be dealt with? Because for me, beggars can't be choosers, so to say. That probably for Kenyans who are not, so to say, liquid, they don't have large amounts of disposable incomes, then it behooves the people you've been talking about, the government, other stakeholders, to start to get these people to eat in ways that will not only increase efficiency, but also enable them to tap what is available in more affordable forms to their own benefit.
Probably we can now switch, because for me, I say the local market is super, it's there, the market, the produce is available.
Yes.
But then we can now start thinking of the technology. Can we have at county or sub-county level locations where farmers harvest and store their produce? You know?
Because and there is, sorry to interrupt, the reason I keep going back to this is because for me, I think we've normalized the Kadogo economy, where because I want fresh, I'm happy to have a mama mboga within 500 meters of my house, chopping up veggies every evening for me to take. But it's the most inefficient thing when you think about it, right? Because if this was prepared at some source and delivered through some chain that utilizes the same people, by the way, but removes the processing from their hands and automates it somewhere and simply makes them the opposite of, they're the aggregators of demand at their level. I mean, we'd see dramatic shifts in consumption and pricing.
Yes, but when you talk about pricing, okay, let me bring all this context into why contract farming is. I think we're getting ready for contract farming.
Yes,
but we also need to know that contract farming would only make a lot of sense if you're growing export crops because of the returns.
Yes.
For the local market, when it rains, you will have wild managu, wild for even 2 months.
Yes.
So if you are contracted to grow managu,
you can't compete.
You can't compete.
Yes.
You know, if I am in Eastern Province, Kwambani, I have nzu that I will harvest for close to 6 months.
Yes.
So even if you contract me to grow it, then it does not make sense. So I think when we talk about contract farming, and I think it is important for us to be categorical and know that contract farming only makes sense when it comes to export crops. And that is where now the regulation needs to be put, the education to farmers need to be there, and the protection of both farmers and buyers have to be enforced. The thing is that the challenges that farmers are facing for growing for export are things like the licenses required. Phytosanitary licenses, global gap certification, which is very expensive. So sometimes you find the exporters get these licenses under their name using your farm. So now you are the grower. You need to have the license under your name, but it is with the exporter. So that means that if whatever when they don't buy from you, there's nothing to protect you. But you see, if it is your license. The other thing is also when it comes to contract farming, and I always say, I talk to farmers and say, farming is not cheap.
It's definitely not cheap.
We have, as you've said, that we have normalized a certain part. I think we've also normalized that farming is for people who don't have money. I'm not saying that I don't have money. I've been farming for 17 years. However, we have just normalized that farming belongs to some people. But we are also talking about export. If you look at the conference participants, we are having the Minister of Cooperative will be there. We are having the Minister of Agriculture who will be there. We are having really top, big companies, especially even some really big farmers in Kenya who will be there in the conference. So when you talk about contract farming, I think it's important so that we don't mislead farmers, is that we focus on now the contract farming for export, because that is where the returns are. So that even if I can be able to afford to grow and store, whatever I'm selling at is able to take care of my storage. Either the freezer, cold rooms, or stuff like that, and also the transportation. The other thing is when you talk about that in terms of contract farming, and is specific crops. Not all crops can be contracted. Contract farming would only make sense for crops that are high value, that also require you to put a certain investment in it. For example, chilies, you need to grow chilies under shed net. So not all farmers can afford to do it. Even those who can afford might not see the essence of doing it, because there are some times that even the crops don't make sense in terms of money. As we are going towards October, November, December, January, February, March, any crop grown on contract for export, the prices will be high, because a very big part of Europe
is in winter,
so they cannot grow. So why would I grow tomatoes or French beans when Netherlands is growing? And Netherlands is already there. It's already near. It's in Europe. So they will supply the rest. So those are the things I have to look at, so that we now start seeing what are the dynamics that farmers need to understand, what is the training required on behalf of farmers, and that is one of the things that we are hoping to get that from the conference that is going to come.
Quite a bit to unpack there. Essentially, so which specific areas then would you be urging people to start thinking about when we talk about the different types of crops for export, that farmers can start to align, even as they now think about looking forward to this conference?
First of all, as farmers, because those are the ones we want to talk to so much. I think when it comes to farmers, they need to first of all not think of the end, which is the money, but how then do they prepare? And this comes in when you start the actual farming. You know, I normally tell people, if I was to do this again, I would do it very differently. Because then you know where the toilets should be in the farm, you know the water source, you know the locations of things. Because when you walk into a farm in Europe or America, it's so different from the way you walk into a farm.
So even the arrangement of the locations of things on your farm.
The facilities. The workers who are working on the farm cannot walk in with the clothes they've come from the houses. They have to change, When they're leaving the farm, remember they're also carrying so many chemicals by virtue of passing through the farm. There has to be showers where they shower before they leave. So you see that's why I'm saying it becomes a bit different. And if you do that on your own, even the exporter will take you serious. Even the regulators will take you serious. Then if you know that whatever is required, so I'm not blaming farmers, but I'm saying we as farmers have a role to play, because we're the ones who are going to produce. The exporter will just come and pick and go. So
where do we get this research then? If I wanted to start thinking about how I'm going to plan my farm, is it come to the conference? Is it look for a person like you? Is it look for something on the internet?
I think this conference is going to be a game changer. And in fact, that was the reason why I said I would really love to be part of this. Is because if you look at what is going to be discussed for the whole 2 days, is going to address all those issues, including cooperatives. We're having the CS of cooperatives going to be there, including the regulation and regulators who are going to be there.
Yes.
I think the conference will be the game changer. Yes.
So then let's talk about the different aspects of the value chain. The fact that when it comes to contract farming, even if you are not a contract farmer, like you said, because contract farming, even farming is not for everybody. What are the possible other roles that young people can play along this value chain that will enable them cut their own niches and earn some sort of living?
Well, young people have to take it up. First of all, they have to love it. And loving it, I am not a pro make agriculture sexy.
Yes.
No. Make it something that people can want to do.
Yes.
And how do you do this? By making sure that those who are already in it are benefiting.
Yes.
Because if I am a farmer and I come back home and I'm always complaining on things about farming,
yes.
In fact, my kids will when they hear me coming in, they run away because they know this guy is just coming to complain. Yeah. So they will never think about farming. But if we start thinking of how then do we bring in the young people, the Gen Zs, now we're going to have Generation Alpha also, getting attracted to this is by them seeing that there is something coming out of it. So is it money? Definitely. Because the young people want to see which route can I use, the shortest route to make money. And this means that we have to remove the aspect of you have to be the actual farmer to do it. There's so many aspects. For example, I have not seen of a young lawyer who is going to take up and say, I'm going to design contracts for farmers. I'm going to create a small constitution of, if you want, how do you enforce contracts? Yes. I've not seen young people taking up drone technology.
Yes,
I'm saying behind there. Is it that the regulation of these young people is to be able to do this too expensive for them? So can we make sure that we also change the syllabus of the education system? Because I don't see why we have young people. Right now we have close to 300,000 young people who have studied agriculture the last probably 10 to 15 years who are jobless. So is it possible for us to make sure that we can bring them in, but not bring them in to just touch the soil, but bring them in a way that they would love to touch the soil. Remember, when you talk about agribusiness, it's just like any other business.
Yes.
For you to master, it will be very hard for you to go and open a garage.
Yes.
If you're not a mechanic. So you have to learn the agri.
Yes.
And this agri does not necessarily mean you have to go to the ground. You can now create partnerships. You form, for example, 5 or 6 youth, one who's very good with soil, one who's good in spraying, one who's good in something else, and one who's good in marketing, so that they can be able to market this and attract farmers to them. So we have to change the mindset, because when I talk about farming at my age, and I'm talking to my sons who are 14 years, there's 40 years, not my age, there's close to 40 years difference. So the way I'm looking at farming probably as a retirement thing. But then they're looking at it as, can we do it for money now? Yes.
Okay, then let's talk about the market end of things, because I think that's the biggest challenge for many people. Earlier on, you mentioned that you'd worked with a person who you'd have to deliver to at the airport. So a lot of people have questions around how they get into the market. And we're often told that they're exporters who are licensed, like you mentioned. Many Kenyan players simply supply to these people. Are there ways to get into this market yourself, or do you then continue to play the role of supplying to these exporters? How do you then consolidate your position here?
Again, I go back to saying farming is not for everyone.
Yes.
You know, so you need to ask yourself, even if you have to go and get a contract, for example, even if I go and get a contract, then I will have to be a broker again.
Yes.
Because probably I cannot satisfy the contract itself. But then can we come together and have a group of farmers, each with 5 to 10 acres, and go and get this market? Then do we have the financial muscle to be able to deliver this? Because sometimes you are given a contract, then you have to deliver, then you're paid. You know. So for me, I think for farmers, if you are farming, perfect it so well. If somebody is exporting, then partner. I'm one person who really believes in partnerships. Then partner with somebody who is an exporter. But we also have farmers who are doing an amazing job. There's a lady from Karakuta who's doing avocados. And for her, she decided, I'm going to these shows, the fruit and vegetable shows in Europe, and going to, and saying, I'm looking for the market. Remember also, you're doing a business.
Yes.
And money doesn't come to you. You always go and look for this money. You know, it's only banks that money comes to them.
Yes.
But you have to go to and market yourself. But as you go to market yourself, then you also need to have understood the regulation that is required. Because you don't want to go out there and then you get a buyer and the buyer tells you, next week I want you to deliver X produce. And then you don't have the regulation in terms of licenses.
The phytosanitary.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay. So it goes back to the farmer as well and say, if I am going to do business, these are the factors that I need to consider. You know, the location of my farm, the water source, using chemicals that are not, you know, not banned. So all these things, first of all, starts with farmers. But when it comes to the market for contract farming, I think it is ripe.
Is there a sort of minimum size of acreage of farms that you can have to sort of, for this to make sense?
It will depend with the produce. For example, if you're doing things like herbs, basil, such thyme and stuff like that, mint, you just need probably controlled areas. You know, for example, you have shed nets or greenhouses, which can produce, you know, much more. When you're doing now the French beans and the rest, you know, aubergines and the rest, then you need really good chunks of land. So it depends with the line that you want to take.
What about costing? Because I've seen, for example, for flowers and veggies and that sort of thing, I've seen farms that grow as far away as Eldoret and Timau, but still drive their produce to Nairobi, to the airport, and it goes. And I've seen people from Kiambu here. So in terms of the cost-benefit analysis, how do you decide on what crops to be able to sell so as to make the sort of margins we are talking about? Because I think those guys are still making money despite the distance.
Yes, you see, that's why I said you have to think of it as a business. So think of it as a business. You have to make sure that 40% of your cost is transport. Transport and logistics bit.
Wow.
So you need to ask yourself, of that 40% of it, how much produce then am I delivering? Because somebody in Kajiado delivering 10 tons and somebody from Timau delivering 10 tons, you're not making a lot of money out there. But if somebody from Kajiado is delivering 10 tons and you are bringing 30 tons, and you have good market, automatically you know that indeed you're going to break even. Again, farming is not a get-rich-quick scheme. So it means that even if you're delivering 30 tons, then how consistent are you with your 30 tons? There might be somebody else who is consistent every week. They're doing 6 tons. So that means that even this buyer is attracted to them. But you're doing 30 tons after another, you know, until the time that somebody calls you. So you even lose this. And that's what happens even with the local produce, the tomatoes and the rest. A buyer will only come to you if you are regular. Yes.
As we close, let's think about the issues we've raised as challenges. If there was one thing that government and other stakeholders would do to make contract farming make sense, to make it work, make it easier for farmers, make it easier for stakeholders who want to get into that space, what would it be?
Just regulation. Just reduce the paperwork, reduce that regulation. And then we as the farmers, please, government, just be our friends. We are feeding the nation. Yeah, have that. I don't see government really going to talk to farmers. You know, we feel we are on our own. And that's why you can easily say they can't and they won't. You know, that kind of thing. Yeah, just reduce that regulation and just make us closer to you. Yeah.
What about extension services? Because we know there's been a
That's the easiest way of bringing us closer to you. Because then I don't need a broker.
Yes.
You know, the extension officer, Kenya is an agricultural research country. So the extension officers are used to come and bring questionnaires about this happening, running this, try this, but they're not lifting us to them. And that's why I have never seen an award of the best extension officer in Kenya. Yeah.
Okay, indeed. Thank you very much. Food for thought for the various players along that value chain. But thank you very much now for taking the time to talk to us here on Farm Kenya. Of course, that conversation there brings us to the end of this show. Contract farming being something that is taking this nation's agricultural forward and into the future and providing opportunity for many young people in that space to carve their niche and earn their living. Well, it's been a pleasure hosting you. My name is Peter Akaba. Of course, thank you to our guest now for taking the time to talk to us. But from us now, it is Kwaheri ya Kuonana. Of course, the news continues here on KTN. Do continue to stay with us.